Have you ever been certain of your own goodness, only to wonder, in the darkest corners of your mind, what you might be capable of if the circumstances demanded it? What if I told you that the line between hero and monster is much thinner than you think? That the difference between an ordinary person and a villain in history books isn't a matter of moral strength, but of pressure, environment, and an unsettling psychological phenomenon that can turn good people into perpetrators of unspeakable acts. This isn't a story about them, it's about us. The shocking truth is that countless individuals who committed atrocities were once no different than you or me. They laughed, they loved, they had families, they had dreams. Then something changed. Something led them across that invisible boundary between decency and destruction. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how it happens. We're unraveling the terrifying mechanics that push good people into the abyss. And more importantly, how to recognize and resist these forces before they take hold of you. Because the most dangerous thing isn't the evil out there. It's the evil we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist behind the infamous Stanford Prison Experiment, coined the term the Lucifer effect to describe how ordinary individuals can be transformed into perpetrators of harm. What his research uncovered was not just shocking, it was deeply uncomfortable. Because it showed us that under the right circumstances, morality can dissolve like smoke. Let's start with one of the most chilling realities of human psychology: the power of authority. In the 1960s, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment that still haunts the world today. Participants were asked to administer electric shocks to another person whenever they answered a question incorrectly. Unbeknownst to them, the person receiving the shocks was an actor. There was no real pain, but the participants believed they were causing actual harm. At first, they hesitated, but as a stern authority figure in a lab coat reassured them, the experiment must continue. They pressed on. And here's the terrifying part. The majority of participants, ordinary men and women, went all the way, delivering what they believed were lethal shocks simply because they were told to do so. Think about that. How often do we obey instructions without question? A boss tells you to bend the rules at work. A leader tells you to distrust a group of people. A government tells you to look the other way. We tell ourselves, it's not my responsibility. But history tells us that this kind of thinking is how injustice festers, how cruelty becomes normalized. Yet authority alone isn't enough. There's another force at play, just as insidious: dehumanization. The moment you stop seeing someone as fully human, the moment they become an enemy, an outsider, or just a faceless other, you create the conditions where anything becomes justifiable. This is the tactic of tyrants, war criminals, and propagandists throughout history. Call someone a pest, and suddenly extermination seems reasonable. Call someone a threat, and cruelty turns into self-defense. The words we use aren't just words, they are the difference between empathy and indifference, between helping someone and harming them. And before you think this is just something that happens in dictatorships and war zones, ask yourself this: how often have you seen people reduced to labels? Them, the enemy, the problem. It's everywhere. Social media, politics, daily life. The more we strip away someone's individuality, the easier it is to justify mistreating them. But even this isn't the whole story, because one of the most dangerous forces of all is something much closer to home: group dynamics. In Zimbardo's Stanford Prison Experiment, college students were randomly assigned roles. Some were prison guards, others were prisoners. There were no bad people in that room, just students playing a role. Yet within days, those assigned as guards became disturbingly cruel, and those as prisoners collapsed into obedience and despair. Why? Because we do what our roles demand of us. We conform to expectations. We slip into patterns without even realizing it. How much of who you are is truly you? And how much is shaped by the role society has assigned you? The way you treat coworkers, family, strangers, how much of it is dictated by the invisible pressures of your surroundings? The reality is, these psychological forces aren't theoretical. They shape our choices every single day. And here's the scariest part. The transformation from good to evil rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in small, almost imperceptible steps. First, you let a small injustice slide, then another. You tell yourself it's not your problem. You make excuses, you stay silent, and before you realize it, you've become part of the very thing you once condemned. Think about your own life. Have you ever compromised your values just a little because it was easier? What were the consequences? Understanding these forces is only the first step, because the real question is, can we resist them, or are we all doomed to fall? What comes next may challenge everything you believe about human nature. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect? Is there such a thing as an incorruptible person? The answer, however unsettling, is no. Psychologists have long searched for the traits that separate those who resist from those who succumb. And while qualities like empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage make a difference, the truth is this: under the right circumstances, everyone is vulnerable. Carl Jung called it the shadow self, the hidden, darker aspects of our psyche that we suppress. It's easy to believe that only monsters commit terrible acts. But what if the monster is simply a part of us that we refuse to acknowledge? Ever felt a flash of rage that startled you? Ever done something in a moment of anger that you deeply regretted? That's the shadow self slipping through the cracks. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes us blind to its influence. So if no one is immune, how do we fight back? How do we make sure we stay on the right side of that thin, fragile line? The answer is simple, but not easy. 1. Cultivate moral courage. Standing up for what's right, even when it costs you, even when it's terrifying. History's greatest heroes weren't fearless. They simply refused to let fear silence them. Ask yourself, what are your non-negotiables? What would you never compromise, no matter the pressure? Knowing your values before they're tested is the key to standing firm when it matters most. 2. Practice radical empathy. It's easy to hate from a distance. It's much harder when you look someone in the eyes, when you hear their story, when you understand their fears and hopes. Dehumanization thrives on distance. Connection destroys it. 3. Resist the small, slippery slopes. Evil doesn't arrive with a bang. It seeps in through quiet compromises. Next time you're tempted to let something go, ask yourself, if everyone did what I'm about to do, what kind of world would we live in? The battle between good and evil isn't fought on grand stages. It's fought in the choices you make every single day. Because in the end, the most powerful realization is this: the line between good and evil isn't out there. It runs straight through every human heart. And the only question that matters is, which side will you choose? Make sure to subscribe to the Mind's Mirror channel. Don't forget to hit the like button. Share this video with those who need to hear this truth, and stay tuned for new content every day together. Let's continue the journey toward understanding growth and the pursuit of a more powerful life.